Mr. Chairman, Director General, delegates, allow me on behalf of the Russian delegation to congratulate you, Mr. Chairman, on your election to this very important post. We count on the fact that under your leadership, the work of the 22nd Conference of States Parties of the CWC will take place in an atmosphere of mutual understanding, objectivity, and constructive cooperation, and decisions will be able to be made in a spirit of tolerance and consensus. Mr. Chairman, first of all, I would like to read out here an announcement from the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, to this conference. Delegates of the 22nd session of the Conference of States Parties on the CWC. Delegates, I would like to congratulate you on the 20th anniversary of the CWC. This anniversary is marked by the full elimination of Russian chemical weapons. At Kisner in the Udmurt Republic on September 27th of this year, we destroyed the last of the chemical munitions in our country. This is undoubtedly an important step on the path towards a more reliable and stable world. The elimination of chemical weapons in Russia has taken place under strict international controls and in full accordance with the CWC. We would like to express our gratitude to the TS of the OPCW and the member states for their long cooperation. We count on further effective cooperation with this organization. We would like to call on all those states that are possessing chemical weapons to eliminate them as quickly as possible. And those states that are still outside the legal field of the convention should immediately accede to it. We are convinced that only with full and strict political will we be able to create a world free of chemical weapons. We would like to wish all of the members of the conference to work effectively to achieve all of the goals foreseen in this convention. Vladimir Putin. Mr. Chairman, the CWC is truly one of the most effective multilateral mechanisms in disarmament and non-proliferation, and it is effectively supporting the foundations of international security. At this point, the OPCW brings together 192 countries in the world, and over the last period in 1997, we've seen impressive results. The elimination of 96% of approximately 72,000 tons of chemical agents which were to be destroyed under the convention. In other words, we are very close to freeing the world from this destructive weapon. Mr. Chairman, as our President has said, this anniversary of the CWC is a very important one for our country as well. We have been able to fully implement our federally targeted program on eliminated chemical weapon stockpiles, and in this way we have made a very important contribution to the elimination of the most dangerous type of WMD. For us, it was very important that in spite of the financial, economic, and technological difficulties, we were able to eliminate the most imposing chemical weapons arsenal in the world, and which was approximately 40,000 tons. And we did this under strict international controls, and 3 years earlier than we were supposed to. As a representative of our national authority of the Russian Federation implementing the CWC, we would like to join together with the words of our President and thank the TS of the OPCW, as well as all of those countries who have contributed pretty much 10% of all of the aggregate resources that we spent in Russia on this. Belgium, United Kingdom, Ireland, Italy, Canada, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, United States, Germany, Finland, France, the Czech Republic, Switzerland, and Sweden. Mr. Chairman, the governing bodies of the OPCW have always worked harmoniously in the member states, have been able to discuss things and agree on things, and they have been able to adopt things by consensus. One good example of this is the development and implementation of the unprecedentedly short program for eliminating the chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic. Thanks to this noble mission, we put aside our disagreements, and all of our efforts were concentrated on one common goal, which is the chemical demilitarization of Syria. And it's possible that we could not have done this without political will and without the help of the Syrian authorities. Mr. Chairman, at the same time, we have to note, sadly, that after the TS of the OPCW has confirmed the full elimination of Syria's chemical weapons potential, we've seen that this so-called chemical dossier on this CWC member state has only heated up. Thanks to a certain group of countries that are acting in their own political interests. The discussions on this area are becoming more and more politicized. The Syrian Arab Republic is hearing and is continuing to hear new and completely unfounded accusations on their first CWC declaration and on the alleged use of toxic chemicals and chemical agents against many different groups of military opposition and of the civilian population. In other words, against a CWC member state, which for many years has been combating extremism and terrorism that has been sponsored from outside, is now being subject to a double standard. And this is only undermining the credibility of the CWC and of the OPCW. Mr. Chairman, in response to yet another outbreak of anti-Syrian emotions in this forum, we would like to emphasize that the Syrian Arab Republic joined the convention in 2013, which meant that it took a decision to fully renounce these weapons. From the very beginning, even more than any other member of the CWC, they have been unprecedentedly open. They have talked even openly about the history of their military and chemical program, and they've worked together with the TS of the OPCW. And Damascus has worked together with us and constituted two missions of the OPCW, first of all a DAT and then secondly an FFM. As to the DAT, then there are still a few questions that remain. Here, there are some issues that need some explanation, even though Damascus has given us an enormous amount of material. However, of course, these need to be looked at in a fully technical way without any type of politicization. As to the second mission, that is the fact-finding mission on the use of chemical weapons in Syria, we have made our skepticism open, and from the very beginning of this 3 years of work, we've seen that the FFM has moved away from its main goal, which is described in the CWC and its appendix. First of all, they were remotely investigating without actually showing up on site. They were seeing evidence collected by Syrian opposition and taking in their testimony, and they were not following the chain of custody. Mr. Chairman, I must also mention the completely unacceptable situation which has been created recently in the UN Security Council by our Western colleagues in the P5 and their fellow travelers on extending the mandate of the OPCW UN JIM on investigating the incidents of the use of chemical weapons in Syria. The very fact that just 2 days before the 7th report of the JIM on the chemical incident with so many repercussions in Syria and Khan Sheikhin, that just 2 days before that, the American colleagues tried to talk about a mechanical extension of the mandate of this JIM has talks about a lot here. In fact, we're seeing that this cynical approach has went against the draft resolution of Russia, China, and Bolivia, and has killed the mechanism. And this shows that they're trying to use any credible international organization, the UN, the OPCW, or anybody else, for their own geopolitical ambitions in Syria and in the Middle East. Mr. Chairman, so as not to abuse our time, I'm not going to repeat our fully critical evaluations of the GIM's work over the last couple of years. I would just like to ask the member states of the conference to very attentively take a look at the national document on the OPCW extranet called the Additional Russian Evaluation of the Seventh Report of the GIM, which gives the scientific bases for the analysis of our specialists and of those conclusions of the seventh report of the GIM on the incident in Khan Shaykhun. Just using this material, you can see how much the directors of the GIM and in the fact-finding mission have taken on unprofessional and politically biased working methods. It's true that this probably came down from an order on high, where some of the Western countries wanted their own version of the bombing of Khan Shaykhun with chemical weapons. In this way, they are able to justify the air attack on the Syrian Al-Sharat air base, which is a violation of the UN Charter and is a violation of all international law standards. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to emphasize here that the Russian Federation has very decisively worked against the use of chemical weapons, no matter where they might be used or no matter by whom. We would like to see the truth. We would like to see who the perpetrators are and have them brought to justice. And this is the only verdict that we can see, that we want to see happening. Any politicization of the Syrian chemical dossier is very negative, both for the integrity of the CWC and the credibility of this organization. Moreover, the unending, unfounded accusations of Damascus and the use of toxic chemicals and military chemical agents are playing into the hands of terrorists and extremists who are using anything that they can to make sure to discredit the elected Syrian government. It's very obvious that this is going to play into the hands of chemical terrorism, and sooner or later we're going to see that this terrorism will leave Syria and Iraq and the Middle East in general, and it will start to become a very dangerous situation for all of us, and we have been talking about this. Mr. Chairman, the Russian Federation, together with like-minded states, have been working for several years and in many different international formats, and first of all in the UNSC, to work against chemical terrorism and to see us working together. However, not all of our initiatives have found support among all of our Western colleagues. We are certain that the OPCW must work even more actively on qualitatively improving our potential and our work to react against this type of chemical terrorism. And to this end, we welcome the decision that was adopted in the 86th session of the EEC on combating chemical terrorism. This is a very good example of the fact that consensus still does exist in the OPCW, and that with political will, we can make these decisions. We'd also like to note that member states of the CWC could play a very important role together with many other states on developing within the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva an international convention on combating chemical and biological terrorism, which, as you know, many states here support. Mr. Chairman, the Russian Federation was present at the beginnings of the CWC. We have worked to strengthen this very effective and multilateral agreement and the credibility of the OPCW, and we feel that the universalization of this convention is a very important step towards that. And another very important task is that states must bring their laws into accordance with the provisions of the convention. We must see here also a balance between effective verification and a minimization of verification load on each company, which is only holding back those companies from being able to develop their work. Without any type of improvement of the national legislation, we will not be able to see this regime of non-proliferation be expanded. Mr. Chairman, on the threshold of the fourth review conference in next year, we are seeing discussions on the future priorities of the OPCW, including in the OEWG. And we're talking about now a plan on preventing the reproduction of chemical weapons. The Russian Federation is fully interested in the fact that the OPCW should continue its unique character and its effectiveness in fighting against new challenges and threats, but in a depoliticized way and in a spirit of consensus. Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, we would like to now welcome the fact that at the 86th EC, Mr. Arias Gonzalez was nominated as the future DG of the OPCW. We are going to count on his excellent work to be able to lead us in this evolutionary time of the OPCW in consensus. And I'd like to let you know that the Russian Federation is planning on working constructively with you, and you may fully count on our support. I would like to request that this be considered as an official document of the 22nd session of the conference. Thank you.